Hey, welcome to the Wild Side one more time. I want to ask you a question quickly. Are you a conduit of God's compassion? God's compassion. Can God use you to bring compassion to others? Are you a conduit of God's compassion? It should be no surprise that early in the Old Testament, as a matter of fact, in Exodus 22, we find that God is faithful and He is compassionate. It should be no surprise to you that Jesus, the Son of God, early in Matthew, we find that Jesus felt compassion. You see that phrase several times. That phrase actually means that organs are moving from within. In other words, it's a physiological shift in one's body when they try to be compassionate to someone else. You know, in Matthew 9:35, we find that Jesus saw the crowds, and it says that they were harassed and helpless. And Jesus had compassion for them. And in that compassion is where we have that beautiful metaphor that the people were like sheep without a shepherd. Man, we can thank God for the good shepherd that we find in Christ Jesus because He was simply compassionate. We also find in Matthew 14, we find that it was a time after Jesus had heard about John the Baptist that he had died. And Jesus was going to a solitary place. And in that solitary place, people found out where Jesus was, and they came from several towns, and they brought their sick. And Jesus felt compassion and healed them. Miraculously, we also find in Matthew 15, a non-Jew, a Canaanite woman, screams out and tries to capture the attention of Jesus, needing help for a daughter that was demon-possessed. And surprisingly, she is almost shunned for her request until, as only a mother can, gets in front of Jesus and she bows before Jesus and says these words, "Help me, Lord." It's probably the most sincere prayer that any of us can pray. I've prayed that prayer in the most desperate of times, and I heard the voice of God as He was compassionate. And Jesus gave her request and healed her daughter. It's the same thing true in Matthew 20. We find the blind man. They simply wanted to see Jesus move with compassion. We find in Mark 1, we find Jesus is moved with compassion as He heals the lepers. What's interesting about that story, that we find that Jesus was moved with compassion, and He gave a very strong warning. He said simply this. He says, "Don't tell anyone, go to the priest." In other words, you need to be politically correct if this healing is going to come about without consequences. Well, in great enthusiasm, these lepers were exuberant about their healing and of course shared, and the crowd was so enthusiastic about what was going on. And it was really a negative for the public ministry of Jesus Christ. Perhaps the greatest story that moves my soul is when we find really in Luke 7:13, Jesus is coming at the gate of a city of Nain, and He encounters a funeral procession. And we find out that there is a woman who has lost her only son. And Luke is so descriptive about this woman that she is not only a woman who has lost a son, it is a woman who is widowed who lost a son. In other words, she lost everything in the death of this young boy. Jesus is moved with compassion. He first goes to the woman and says simply this, "Don't cry. Don't cry." Isn't that the words of Christ for us? Don't worry. I've got it under control. He was compassionate. And then he goes to the coffin, touches the coffin, and life returns to this boy. And Jesus has the boy and takes this young boy to a mother because Jesus was moved with compassion. Well, there's a lot of things we can learn about the ministry of Christ and compassion. Number one, we find that when we want to be a compassionate people and God is using us, it is cross-cultural. The compassion of God will move beyond color and race and ethnicity because it is the heart of God that we are to move beyond where we are to those that are in great need. We only do that with the compassion of God. The second thing we can understand here with regard to the lepers, remember, the lepers were enthusiastic and went contrary to Jesus' instruction, and it cost him. It cost Jesus. As a matter of fact, if you look at the resurrection of Lazarus, it is said after the resurrection that it was then that there was a plot to take the life of Christ. It will cost you to be compassionate. And then lastly, I think we have to understand it is absolutely the heart of God and needs to be in the heart of His people that we are a compassionate people as followers of Jesus Christ, because it is a reflection of who God really is. Now, why is this important? It is important because of this one point. We have the responsibility to share Jesus Christ with the world. The platform of being compassionate will be a wonderful opportunity for us to share God, the sacrifice of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus, and the forgiveness of sin. When we're a compassionate people, we have a greater platform to share the good news of Jesus Christ. If you want to improve your compassionate quota, if you want to be a conduit of compassion, I want to invite you to stream in with Meadows Baptist Church at 9:30 and 11 on Sunday mornings. Dr. Scott can help you to be more compassionate. God bless you this day.